Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we're playing a bit of Sneak and Breach. This is a mono-red deck that wants to cheat into play things like Atraxa, Emrakul, and Worldspine Worm. Basically this column of big giant monsters is what we're trying to chuck into play. And we use Sneak Attack and Through the Breach to do that. And we ramp into those with Seething Song, which conveniently gives us 5 mana, which is enough to play Sneak Attack and activate it or play Through the Breach. So we're trying to go as fast as we can and get these out and just run our opponent over on turn 2, sometimes turn 1. Worldspine Worm, if you're not familiar with this one, is really good. 15/15 trample. When it dies, we get 3 5/5 tramplers. So that's quite potent. We do also have 4 show and tells. And I did say we were a mono red deck, but this is the tiniest of splashes. It's literally just 1 blue card that we've got a couple of Volcanics and the Lotus Petals to cast. Again, this can allow us to cheat some big things into play, or put our Sneak Attack into play and then start firing our monsters at our opponent. I've played various versions of this deck in the past. Some were playing things like Trinisphere and stuff like that, but this particular build uses a new card to give us a backup plan, and that is Elemental Eruption. This is a card that impressed me quite a bit. It just allows you to make a pretty impressive board as early as turn 1. So with all this big column of fast mana in our soul lands, we can just direct this into either doing our Sneak Attack plan, or we can just do an Elemental Eruption. So this means that we should have a plan available to us in every game without necessarily having to mulligan quite as hard. Now, we don't have as much interaction. We basically don't have any, but that's not really what this deck is about. So that's probably okay. Being able to cheat in early Trinispheres was definitely useful in the other builds. So we'll see if we miss that on this one. But because you don't need a lot of Storm for this to be game winning, it's quite handy if we're just doing, like, you know, a Lotus Petal and a Seething Song. Still making 12 power of Prowess Dragons is pretty good. And the last bit of the puzzle here of this deck is a couple of copies of the One Ring, which can just help us gas back up and find the other pieces. So if we get, like, our hand attacked by Griefs or whatever, or counters hit our first attempt, we can try and use this to gas up and go again. And that's pretty much the deck. It's pretty straightforward, but it's an absolute ton of fun. Sideboard-wise, if we need to play through counter spells, we've got some defense grids. We've also got access to Pyroblast to help force things through. We've got some Leyline of Sanctities to stop people discarding our important little bits and pieces. We've got a little bit of Graveyard Hate because there are some Graveyard decks that can outrace us. And then a Braid can deal with some problem permanents like Ensnaring Bridge, Damping Sphere, whatever, as well as being able to hit Thylis. This kind of hits a lot of the things that are going to be messing us up. And yeah, that's the deck. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And it's time for us to jam some giant monsters. Right, welcome to round 1. What does our opening hand do? We can do some worm action, right? 1, 2, 3, 5, this. Sure, let's hope our opponent doesn't blow us out with a counterspell. Let's cast a Rite of Flame. Okay, our opponent looks like they're F6'd over there. Put this Worldspine Worm in. Go to attacks. And there we go. Smash for 15. Now we get 3 5/5s. Not a bad turn 1. Let's hope our opponent doesn't just clap us back with some sort of storm kill on turn 1. Alright. Not a bad showing for the first game. What do we want to do, not knowing what our opponent's got over there? No idea. I think we just go back in with things as they stand. Just have the leanest, most effective combo the combo setup we have. You could brought in a Braids maybe as a hedge against multiple things. But you might just want more pieces. I don't think you can just board in the ley lines and the blind. This is a turn 2 Sneak Attack, turn 3 Activate. That's kind of slow. Probably still okay. I think I will keep this. Got the feeling our opponent is on a non-blue deck. The way that they just F6 there, when a lot of the combo decks that do stuff that looks like what we start off doing will have things like wheels. Thoughtseize. Okay, so probably going to lose the Sneak Attack here, I would imagine. But if this is how our opponent is fighting against what we're doing, then we can board in the ley line. It's a bit annoying that they've seen the Elemental Eruption. Yep, we took a Sneak Attack as expected. A show and tell. Wooded Foothills into Thoughtseize is kind of an odd one. This makes you think our opponent is not on some like big combo-y deck. Like Reanimate or something. So we're just going to throw caution to the wind here. We came to do a thing. Let's do that thing. Let's put a big Worldspine Worm into play. Let's hope our opponent doesn't have a Grizzlebrand or something. Just a Tiger. Alright. I believe a 15-15 has got a pretty good shout at winning this game when our opponent's at 17. Especially since if they kill it, it just gets to make little friends. Seiju who endures. A red and a green. Slick shot show off. Okay, they're attacking. I don't think they can win with 2 cards in hand, but they might be able to win next turn. I'll play this one out. So Berserk can do a lot of work here. So if they've got Berserk plus, you know, mutagenic growth, right, this is the beginning of things going badly for us potentially. Manamorphose, alright, the bird is getting bigger. But they didn't leave up, I guess they left up the green mana via the Lotus Petal. So what is the black they're searching for? They got 1 card left in hand after this. If it's a... Okay, Seek the Beast. We might not be dead. Let's see what they find. Land Grant and Faith is Looting. Okay. So they can mill. That puts them... This puts them to 11. This will put lands in their hand, so their Faith is Looting will leave them with 1 card in hand. So if they find something like a Berserk, we can be dead here, or a Lightning Bolt. This is a pretty sweet turn from our opponent, to be honest. There's an Arc-like Phoenix in the graveyard. This gives them an attack for 16, and we're on 17. Have they got like a gut shot to finish us off? That was a very sweet turn from our opponent, though. Well, we're not casting any spells. We're just turning the big worm sideways. All right, we got the game there. We had a turn 1, sort of, both games. Turn 1, Worldspine Worm. Living the dream. Our opponent's hand was pretty interesting there, though. If things went slightly differently, then they could have had us. I have to imagine they've got something along the lines of Berserk to just double the power of this and just completely send it stratospheric. But we got the first game in pretty quick fashion. Let's go to round 2. So we have a turn 2 show and tell. But if that doesn't work, we also have a sneak attack that's sort of coming in the pipeline. I think this is okay. I think I will keep this. It's not great against Swords to Plowshares. Lotus Petal. Okay, we might be too slow. There's a lot of combo gamers out there today. A gamble. Right. Ooh. They missed. I think the Lion's Eye Diamond was not what they wanted to discard there. I guess we just play out this Volcanic Island, make ourselves look like a deck that might have some counter magic, give our opponent some pause for thought, and then just slap a Worldspine Worm or a sneak attack into play. Either does good work. I think... Oh, okay. You can just immediately Worldspine Worm here. That does seem better, doesn't it? So exile this, cast this, play the sneak attack, activate sneak attack, put in your friend of mine, Worldspine Worm. Having a real showcase of Worldspine Worm today. We have 15 power still. It's your turn, opponent. They got rather unfortunate that the gamble discarded the Lion's Eye Diamond that they went for. Alright. That's pretty good. So, what do I actually want here? I think Leyline of Sanctity is useful here. Our opponent's going to have some discard, most likely. They're also going to have ways of interacting with our life total via things like Tendrils or Agony. So, we can bring these in. The Sage Extractions are awkward because our opponent isn't going to be putting cards in the graveyard in a timing that we can interact with. So if they crack Lion's Eye Diamond to put their Echo of Aeons into the graveyard, we don't get a window before they get to cast it to remove it. What we could do is bring in some Pyroblast to counter the wheels specifically. And it's 6 cards, which is quite a lot there. The One Ring can buy us a turn. That might be quite useful. But maybe we're better off doing this sort of stuff. What are we going to be trimming? Emrakul, not actually the most impressive here, because they might not have that many permanents in play to sacrifice anyway, because they're not going to be playing out to the board until they're ready to go. So I'm not convinced on the Emrakul. I think that's the one we can trim on, which is unusual. Do I think Show and Tell is too slow though? Maybe. Try something like this. Feels quite defensive. No, normally you don't want to board this many cards in a deck like this. Right, this hand is unplayable. 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana, 4 mana. So we can sneak attack Atraxa on turn 1 if we keep this hand. So I will be doing that. As long as I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I can count. A defense grid. A Lion's Eye Diamond. Are we just getting comboed out here? Could be. There's an Echo. Do I want a Simian Spirit Guide? in exile. Possibly. This gives us the ability to cast a Pyroblast. We do not draw a Pyroblast. What does our hand do here? A lot less than our previous hand. It's not continuing to go, so their hand doesn't just immediately win them the game, which is nice. Or they're just going to the second main phase and it does, which makes a lot more sense actually. We have 3 mana though. If we can... Okay, we didn't find anything that helped us out there. A Leyline of Sanctity. You are no good here. Because our opponent can like cast wheels and stuff, I think we're supposed to play out this Lotus Petal. So at least it's in play if we get wheeled again. Hopefully our opponents just wheel themselves into like a nothing hand. If we can find a Soul Land or a Seething Song, we can sneak attack Emrakul next turn. And it's not going to do amazing work, but it's going to reduce their life total a bunch and strip out these couple of permanents. So they now have Metalcraft with this Petal and Mox Opal. Fiery Islet, 5 cards in our opponent's hand. 2 mana in the pool. Tapping some more mana over there. Our opponent's taken quite a while to think about this one. Which is probably good news for us. They don't just have an immediately obvious line to just smash us to pieces. Ooh, a Galvanic Relay. This might be okay for us. Let's see what they find. Okay, so they have Lines of Diamond, which might be able to echo next turn. So we do need to find one of our, 11 draws I think we need. That's not one of the 11 draws I wanted, is it? Play this out, represent like Force of Will or something that we can play through the defense grid, but we're not doing amazing now. Here comes the Lines of Diamond. Eruth, Tormented Prophet. If you would draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library instead. You may play those cards this turn. Alright. So they can wheel and draw 14. Or they can brainstorm and draw 6. Which seems pretty potent, doesn't it? Right, here comes the Lines of Diamond. So now they've got the mana to play this Echo Aeons and draw 14. And it should be pretty elementary for our opponent to win from here. I think we do... Do we exile? They're going to run out of mana here. Wait, they've only got... Okay, they've already put some mana into it. Yep, okay. So they've got mana floating, so I think we are going to exile this. We did not draw a Pyroblast. Understood. So this is all the cards they can play this turn. There's a lot of them. So there's a Burning Wish over there. They've got 2... Is that 2 Mox Opal? They've got Mox Opal and Lotus Petal. So I can get them black mana for the purposes of casting a Tendrils. They're going to continue to play spells. Manamorphose. This can also get them the black mana they need for their Tendrils. They might just be a Grape Shot deck, so they need to generate a lot higher Storm than a deck that can just Burning Wish for a Tendrils. But I would imagine that they have access to Tendrils in the sideboard, at least with Burning Wish. But we're going to make them show it to us. If they've got some sort of other win condition they're going to go for here, choose a Tendrils of Agony. Yeah, that'll do. But we at least got to see if they had another thing coming out. Do we want to do things differently? I feel like the Leyline and the Pyroblast are both pretty clutch here. No, I think we're just going to go in like this. So what does this hand do? Absolutely nothing. Let's mulligan. What does this hand do? 1 mana. 2 mana. Nothing. We're going to need to go deeper, I'm afraid. Many Leylines and a Sneak Attack. Do we go to 4? We've got the Sneak Attack. We only need a monster. I think this is acceptable. And get rid of a couple of Leylines here. Start with some lands. So we can't get discarded. And we can't get Tendrils while this is in play. They could make a load of goblins, but we are relatively able to beat these goblins. If they do like an Empty the Warrens line. But if they go big, they might have another way of beating us. I know some people have been messing around with Approach of the Second Sun and casting that a couple of times to win the game with a large storm count. So I have to see what our opponent does. Alright. Our opponent is going on turn 1. There is a Chromox. Doing Manamorphose in response to the Chromox trigger in case they draw a card they want to put under Chromox more than what they have in their hand. Just sensible. They're going to be casting Manamorphose anyway. A Brainstorm. That's pretty good news for us. That means they don't have what they're looking for right now. Okay, our opponents finished their Brainstorm and they're going to see about resolving this Chromox trigger. They don't have to put anything under it either if they don't want to. The defense grid. So this might shut us off from doing a bunch of things. They haven't wheeled us into a new hand, for better or worse. Rite of Flame. So this is 1, 2, 3 mana, 4 mana. So we can just play the Rite of Flame this turn. And if we untap, we can draw a monster and try and get our opponent that way. Okay. Oh, it's back to us. They didn't have another follow-up. Well, we've drawn an Emrakul. That's the sort of thing we want here. I hope you like not having permanents, opponent. Now, our opponent can still win from this position. It's just going to be difficult. All it takes is Lion's Eye Diamond plus the Echo of Aeons. The downside for us is we need to draw another monster. Because our opponent is on 4. They've got a few turns to draw something. They did not draw it. It's our turn to try and find something. It's not a monster. Not exactly, anyway. I don't think we're playing out the Scalding Tarn. We're just going to pass. The classic standoff has been engaged. Alright. Elemental Eruptions. These are not monsters. But they are. But not the sort of monsters we need for our sneak attack. Through the Breach is also not what we need. We've let our opponent draw up to a full hand pretty much now. So they're going to be able to throw in a combo attempt at us very soon. Is this a turn that we draw a monster? It's not a monster, but it does win the game next turn. To go red off of this. This gives us 5 mana, and then this will be our 6th mana. Let's crack this. Go and get ourselves Volcanic. This is Elemental Eruption. So we're giving our opponent notice that they have 1 turn before either of these dragons kills them. Let's see if our opponent can do it. 7 cards in hand. Maybe they've just got a bunch of like Lion's Eye Diamonds and Morphoses and no way of getting mana off the ground. Alright, they did not have anything and we managed to get there doing both halves of the thing that we want to do there. Our hand was a little bit of an awkward one and we were kind of fortunate to draw that Emrakul when we did. Part of the downside of this deck is we're more explosive, but we don't have the ability to dig for what we want. We don't have the ponders and brainstorms that the blue-red sneak attack decks do. But those decks aren't doing very well in the format at the moment, so we're seeing just the raw power of this build doing some work. Let's go to round 3. So this second hand is a turn 2 copy of the One Ring. Is that good enough? It's pretty strong. It is slower than the sort of stuff we normally want to be doing. If we get picked apart by discard, they could take our One Ring and then follow up with a sneak attack later. I think we might be able to do better than this one, so I'm going to mulligan. Okay, so this is a turn 2 sneak attack Emrakul. That seems pretty good. We'll keep this and we'll get rid of the Elemental Eruption for now. We can also lead off on the Scalding Tarn, so we don't have to worry about being wastelanded in the first turn cycle. I think we want Scalding Tarn, so we can go and get blue mana for show and tell. There's a brainstorm from our opponent. My usual thoughts when I see a Volcanic Island on the other side of the board is that we're looking at some kind of blue-red Delver deck, because those are decks that run the most Volcanic Islands, but it could be a Sneak and Show deck, could be a combo deck, could be a control deck, a standstill deck. Okay. So our opponent's going to draw a bunch of cards and we try and go for it here. So we get this Volcanic here, then deploy the Ancient Tomb. You will get to draw some cards, our opponent. I'm counting on the fact that what we're doing is more powerful than what you're doing. So if this resolves, then we just win the game. If it doesn't, we can then play sneak attack next turn. Yeah, Force of Will as expected. I think I would probably put the Emrakul in if this resolved, but it's not resolving. So next turn, we can play sneak attack and activate it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got the Spirit Guide. All right, that wasteland is awkward. Are they going to play another standstill? They are. Okay, getting a little bit jammed up here. I think we're going for it. That's what our deck does. Can we have sneak attack, please? We can. We will activate sneak attack. We'll put an Emrakul. We will blow up our opponent's permanents. There's only 2 of them, but it does set our opponent back a little bit, and any creature off the top is then lethal. But apart from Simian Spirit Guide. A wasteland. They can take out our Volcanic if they want to, but we have 1 red source. That's all we require to win the game. Our opponent's on cleanup now. Through the Breach. That is not the red source we were looking for. No, sorry, not red source. The creature we were looking for. There is a Plains. This means they might be able to source the Plowshares, a creature that we put in. There is a mountain. If our opponent plays a blue source, then we're going to start activating the sneak attack in our opponent's end step and make them think we have something spooky that can get them. See if they have a stifle that they want to fire off. Let's test the water here. Right, just testing your opponent. Another sneak attack. Right, again, just testing our opponent a little bit. Timeless Dragon. I do like a Timeless Dragon. Okay. So our opponent's going to be able to deploy quite a lot of cards that they might have in their hand now. Show and tell. That's not the one, is it? So they've got a Brainstorm fetch land, so they're going to have quite a nice amount of sculpting available to them now. They've gone to 3. If they use another fetch land, it does mean that a Simian Spirit Guide can be lethal. Cycling another Timeless Dragon. We need Emrakul. Atraxa is probably fine as well. We can just get the trigger going. And most likely find a creature in our top 10. Otawara on the sneak attack. That's pretty good. So now we need to get a sneak attack into play. If we can draw the mana, we have many sneak attacks to test our opponent with. Like a soul land would be quite nice. Although our opponent has shown us to have wastelands in their deck. Okay, let's cast a Rite of Flame. Let's cast a Seething Song. That's a sneak attack. A Round of Days. A Spell Pierce, sure. We have more of these down the line. There's an argument there for waiting till we have one more land so we can just use one of those ramp spells. Jace the Mind Sculptor. So a chance of us being able to draw... Okay, no, they're not going to Fate Seal us. That's just the hand might be a little softer than they'd like. Or they just love the greed of getting that free Brainstorm every turn. But I quite like Fate Sealing against combo players in a situation like this. They've got a grip full of cards. But again, we don't know what's in our opponent's hand. Might be the perfectly correct decision. Let's Rite of Flame. Cast Sneak Attack. Got Force of Will or another Spell Pierce or something. Force of Will, pitching Supreme Verdict. We've got another one where that came from. And another one in Through the Breach as well. So they cycle in their upkeep to get round the cards they put on top to shuffle them away so they can get some fresh looks. Quite Timeless Dragon heavy. There's what, 3 of them they've cycled so far this game? Makes sense when they're playing like Standstill. But they're on a lot of colours for a Standstill deck. Like Hot Esper. Emrakul the Aeons Torn. Okay, so we have the thing we're looking for. We just need some mana. Still not Fate Sealing us. I guess it's a tricky one because I don't necessarily know what we're lacking. Age of Fairy. If we lose this game, it's going to take a little while. This doesn't do anything yet, unfortunately. But maybe soon. So they're drawing more cards yet again. They're probably just going to hold up Force of Will amounts of mana. Curious to see what their actual win condition is. It probably has to be something like Shark Typhoon, and they're just going to cycle a big one at our end step and then start attacking us. A Shark can also block the Emrakul pretty effectively as well. We've also seen Supreme Verdict from our opponent, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had a Wrath for our creature if we show and telled in, which is not what we're going to do here. Let's go for a sneak attack here. A Spell Pierce. We cannot pay. So next turn we get to attempt to Through the Breach. If our opponent attacks this Timeless Dragon, it means it's not back to block. So they're going to put a Spell Pierce on top of their library. Okay. So we find a blue source. We can attempt the Show and Tell instead. But Jace can just bounce the Emrakul, and that's pretty annoying. So maybe we're supposed to put the Through the Breach on the stat last turn instead of the sneak attack. How am I going to get through the Spell Pierce? That is a taxing question for sure. A Lotus Petal. We can Through the Breach here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we know our opponent's got Spell Pierce, so we need to draw another mana source. Maybe we're not supposed to play out that Petal, so that we at least have an option for doing an Elemental Eruption. Not that I think the Elemental Eruption is going to be amazing in this spot, when our opponent can just make a load of 4/4 dragons. Anyway, so we're looking for a mana source. A Seething Song, that is a mana source. They've normally been letting these resolve, but we shall see. Are we just going to let this go? If we fight over this, we lose our Lotus Petals. We can't do any Show and Tell action, if that's the thing we want to do. If we pay for this, it costs us one of these 2 resources. If we just let this go, we can just try Through the Breach next turn that maybe doesn't take any of our resources, or it's only going to take one of these resources. No, I think we let that go, and then we try again next turn. I think that works out better for us most of the time. It's going to be Shark. Just the old instant speed Lorien reveal due to Teferi. Well, our opponent is certainly good at drawing the old cards, that's for sure. Wasteland. That was a little bit punishing. If we draw a land, we can still attempt to through the breach. But our opponent's got so many cards and done so much sculpting. I have to imagine that they can get there. They're on 1 life. Not that we have any way of capitalising on them being on 1 life. I'm not playing out a Simian Spirit Guide to beat down in the face of Jace and Teferi. The One Ring. That is worth casting. Our opponent's got 7 cards. I can't imagine this is resolving. Dovin's Veto. Very much not resolving. So our opponent attacks us down to 4 here. Sorry, down 4-4, then puts us to 1. Still no Shark Typhoon. What can we possibly draw here? I don't think there's anything we can draw here. We're gonna stop our opponent from seeing the top card of our deck and concede. Yeah, we just bricked on creatures for a few turns and it didn't quite get there for us. These are cards I want in this matchup. What cards do I not want? Show and Tell does not allow them to put Planeswalkers in, and that's the thing that's scariest they can do. So I'm not too bothered by that. Although if we Show and Tell in an Emrakul and they put in a Jace and they like cast a Jace or a Teferi, that ends up really badly for us. So I don't think we actually want the Show and Tells, because they can just bounce it. I think the Storm package is pretty good. Our opponent didn't see it, so it's going to be a bit of a surprise for them. Worldspine Worm is less good against the Swords to Plowshares deck. So I think this is maybe somewhere where we can trim. We can trim here. I like the Seething Song because it's +2 mana. I like the Simian Spirit Guide. It's surprise mana. We could board out a Rite of Flame potentially if this one's going to be a touch slower. And then is it just another Worldspine Worm? Although if you've got the defense grid and the Worldspine Worm gets to do its thing, that's pretty savage. Maybe we can board out a land since it might be a little bit of a slow one. It's boarding out quite a lot of resources. Maybe it's just another Rite of Flame rather than a land. Right, let's try it like this. Okay, this hand does things I want it to do. So we have a force check on turn 1 with the defense grid. And then we get to make a turn. They use the Spell Pierce as well. That's suggesting to me they have more counter spells. We can play the sneak attack now, but we've already seen Spell Pierces from our opponents, so I'm a little bit wary of that. We know our opponents to tap out of some mana here. They didn't have a Surveil land at the end. An Elemental Eruption. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we wait for another land, we can play Sneak Attack around a Spell Pierce, but we've also seen Dovin's Veto. We're not in a super rush here, because if we can put our Sneak Attack on the stack and resolve it, we do get to most likely rub a whole lot of our opponent's progress out. They're not going to be committing additional permanents to the board very often, because they're a control deck. So the Emrakul should be able to reset their board if we hit them once with it. A City of Traitors. 2, 4. Okay. This allows us to play around one of the things our opponent has. We could just play an Elemental Eruption here and just make a 4-4. And try and force our opponent to answer it. I don't hate that as a strategy. We've brought out our Show and Tell, so we can just go get mountains here. This is a 6 mana 4-4. Not an outstanding Magic the Gathering card in this particular instance. But it's going to force our opponent to have to react to it, because they can't just let us beat them down with a 4-4. And if we can get their life total below 15, it means one Emrakul is lethal as well. And we have another Elemental to gas back up with if we have some other fast mana going on, or just want to play another 4-4. Our opponent's Supreme Verdicts are unlikely to still be in their deck. Can I have a 4-4? A Spell Pierce. That's a-okay with me. That's more permission out of their hand. And they've got a little Island Cycle for good measure. Why not? So our opponent's turn. Brainstorm. Haven't played land yet, so they might be able to fetch away some bad cards here. Does get them closer and closer to that magical 15 though. If they've got blue-white up, we have to be fearful of Dovin's Veto. A Wasteland. Alright, they're going to take out our Ancient Tomb, I think. Does mean they're Brainstorm locked for now, but they've shown us a million cyclers. A standstill. So maybe they don't have any action here, and they're just trying to rely on the standstill drawing them the action they want. 2, 4. We will play this out so we can play around some soft permission. Just get the sneak attack. Opponent does get to draw 3 cards here. Find a force. You haven't seen force of negations yet. Alright, so they have a force of will. 1, 2, 3. Are we going to cast a Simian Spirit Guide in the face of our opponent's wasteland? I don't think we are. We just pass through. I would rather be in our opponent's shoes right now. Every turn that goes on is better for them as well. Yep, there goes our Ancient Tomb. That was always going to happen. That's why we didn't play out the Simian Spirit Guide. I don't think a 2-2 is going to be enough here. Okay, at Wasteland, we're probably going to lose our Volcanic Island. Very happy to have our Simian Spirit Guide. We're close to putting Sneak Attack into play again. Our opponent's turn. They've got another land drop. Haven't got anything like a Jace. They're just holding up a whole bunch of counter magic, I would imagine. Do we play this out? We've seen 2 Wastelands already. We kind of need to have another land. Given the state we're in, I think we can probably hold out and try and find another defense grid for a few turns. If our opponent puts some kind of cumulative... Oh, the 3rd Wasteland. Yikes. I was going to say, if our opponent puts up some kind of cumulative card advantage engine like a Jace or something into play, then we might be forced to go before they can dig themselves into what they need. So we can cast a Seething Song into our opponent's open mana here. I don't think that's necessary, and we might be able to use it to make multiple dragons further down the line. The Wandering Emperor. Yeah, that's a thing you're allowed to make. So now they've got a clock. Making little samurai. They're going to put some counters on it on their turn, I suspect, and we're going to be taking 3 damage, then 4 damage. And then they might diversify into more samurais then. Alright, now they're just doing 2 samurai straight up. This does give them more permanence in the face of an Emrakul attacking them. So I don't hate that, actually. Well, I hate it a little bit because I want them to have less permanence, but... A standstill. Which feels very much like how our game's been going, isn't it? Does this get better for us? I don't think so. Have your standstill, opponent. A Fluster Storm. Can't do anything about that one. Yeah, they have the Storm side of our deck covered pretty well with the old Flusters as well. So they've got us on a 2-turn clock now. Sure, have another standstill. We've been ancestral recalling our opponent an awful lot. They've seen nearly half their deck. That's it for us, I'm afraid. Our opponent just had all the tools and were a sort of instant speed playing deck. So I think we knew we were going to lose that game as soon as our defense grid got hit by them playing Force but then pitching another counterspell. That's when we knew that we were probably in trouble. Unfortunate, this seems like a bit of a nightmare matchup in a lot of ways. So I'm not surprised we lost it. Let's go to round 4. We can put Worldspine Worm into play on turn 1 on the play. That's what we came here to do. It was very good in one of our earlier rounds. Let's see if it's good in this round. City of Traitors. Lotus Petal. I don't like this pause. Opponent's giving me blue player vibes. Seething Song. Sneak attack. Oh, we're just in, aren't we? Give me that Worldspine Worm action. This is the day of Worldspine Worm winning the game for us. So we don't, because we are on the play, we don't have to worry about plow on this guy either. So we just have 3 5/5s, which is something I suspect our opponent will not be able to answer. The way we lose this game is if our opponent has a combo kill of their own. Okay, we don't know anything about what's in our opponent's deck. I think we just have to resubmit and hope for the best. We don't want to dilute our plan. And we've got varied plans, which is really nice. Our opening hand is kind of rubbish, so we're going to mulligan this one. This hand is also rubbish in different and interesting ways. Really feeling the Elemental Eruption not being part of the main package here. Let's mulligan. If we find a red source, this hand is great. We've got like 2 turns to find a red source. I'm going to believe in the heart of the cards rather than going lower than this. So 2 of these cards have got to go. So we can get rid of a sneak attack. Do we get rid of the Elemental Eruption or just keep our fast mana? We could get rid of the sneak attack. Just play an Elemental Eruption hand or just the 1 ring into a bunch of card draw. And the more cards we draw, the better Elemental Eruption can look. And the 1 ring will eventually find us our other combo. Right, a mountain from our opponent. Are they some kind of prison-y style deck or a painter deck? Simian Spirit Guide into Null Rod. That's pretty good. Shuts off our 1 ring, which is a pity. I will play this red source that I've found. So next turn we can make a bunch of dragons, and that'll be very good if our opponent is some sort of mono red prison-y style deck. Shadow Skull Smashing. They're very unlikely to be Painter. That is irritating. I won't lie. But we can get through this. Ancient Tomb. So next turn we add 5 to our pool, Seething Song. We cast Rite of Flame just as a spell for Storm, and then we cast our dragons. So this wants to be a basic mountain is fine. I guess we can take a Volk. They're not going to remove our lands unless it's with like Blood Moon effects anyway. This is 3 mana. This gives us 5, 6, 7. Yes, we do have to play the Ancient Tomb out. This is 5, 6, 7 mana. So we can afford to cast this into the Chalice. It's a 4/4 dragon, so I'll take it. If our opponent's got something that's going to challenge our life total, we can fog for the return with the One Ring. Alright, our opponent's just off of it, and we are cruising in this league. So that is a nice, clean 2-0 against what I assume is Mono Red Prison of some description. Let's have a look. We are now 3-1 going into the final round. Let's see if we can put that 4-1 on the board. This hand for the final game is a little bit too slow, so we're going to mulligan this one. This hand is not one that I enjoy either, so let's mulligan as well. Our opponent's mulligan pretty deep. Okay, this is a turn 2, do some stuff. Keep this, we get rid of 1 Worldspine Worm. And then I guess we get rid of a Volcanic Island here. Is that true? They're both +1 mana. But if we keep the Rite of Flame, we might be able to go on turn 1 if we draw any piece of fast mana. So I think I will keep the Rite of Flame here. I wouldn't fault somebody for doing it otherwise. But this leaves us open to some really good turn 1 draws. Ponder, no shuffle. That is the sort of draw we're looking for. Some mana. So next turn we can sneak attack into Worldspine Worm. And if we draw another monster, we can then Rite of Flame to give us enough mana to get over that hump. And put in 2 creatures. We're going to see here a green source. I think we're going to see an Up the Beanstalk. There it is. This could give them access to something like Force of Will. I think we are on the Seething Song into Sneak Attack. Do you have a Force of Will opponent? I hope not. Oh wow, we're in. In comes the big worm. Alright. A great day for Worldspine Worm. I've never seen Worldspine Worm look this good. So Pyroblast and Defense Grids are what we're going to use here to force things through. How do I feel about Show and Tell? What are they going to put in? Up the Beanstalk, Uro, that sort of jazz. We didn't see if they were on black, so we don't know if there's going to be Bowmasters for our One Ring. But if we've got to make room, that's 4 cards. The Worldspine Worm does look a little bit iffy against some of their Source to Plowshares style cards. I do still like Elemental Eruption because it fights on a slightly different axis. So I guess we're getting rid of... It's probably a Simian Spirit Guide rather than a Rite of Flame because these at least give us Storm for this. That leaves us finding 1 more card. Is it another Worldspine Worm? Could be. How many monsters does that give us then? 8. 8 monsters doesn't feel the most. Maybe we get rid of one of these and keep this in. We just have 3 Elemental Eruptions. I don't like this one. Let's mulligan. We need some sort of protection. Okay. This is the sort of hand we're looking for. I don't think we need double Seething Song. The plan here is to keep making defense grids until we can win the game. And hopefully have enough time that that does it. They did not shuffle off of their Ponder. Emrakul, the Aeons Torn. Well, there's a win condition. I would like to not have to use our Lotus Petal to play a defense grid. Let's find a land. Do I really want to use a Simian Spirit Guide to play a defense grid? It means we might be able to try and win the game next turn if we find a land. Is that better? I think it's better to use a Simian Spirit Guide here in case our opponent is running... in case we draw the Storm spell down the line. We get a non-wastelandable land. We'll cast this defense grid. Okay, we're in with defense grid. This might be something our opponent removes using a Leyline Binding. They might have boarded in Force of Vigor because it nails our sneak attack. There is a Brainstorm. Saying fetch land. Right, Bant Mana is established over there. Is this an Up the Beanstalk? It's a Prismatic Ending. Okay. 5 cards on our opponent's hand. We have a similar calculation to last time. And I think we are just playing the defense grid. If they have another prismatic ending, that is really painful for us. This gives us the opportunity to attempt Emrakul next turn. I remember that. Please don't prismatic ending me. Make me sad. Ponder. They did not shuffle off this ponder. Okay, they had another prismatic ending. So we still haven't actually tested them with any count spells yet. Which is infuriating given we had a double defense grid hand. This doesn't do anything. I think I'm more inclined to go for an Elemental Eruption play because they're going to hold back their counter magic for like a sneak attack type card. And they might not see the Elemental Eruption coming. We're going to see a Murktide Regent here. That could do some real work. There it is. It's a 3-turn clock. An Ancient Tomb. This allows us to try an Elemental Eruption. We could try and high roll with the Through the Breach. I think we are just better off making a bunch of dragons. It's not a pivot our opponent would have seen. This way, if we cast the Through the Breach on a later turn, it's going to pump a load of stuff. Yep, so they had a Force of Wills. They're Force of Willing one of our dragons. We could trade both these dragons off for the Murktide. Teferi Time Raveler is very good, isn't it? I keep saying this about my opponent's cards, and that's not how I want to be. Yep, goodbye, dragon. So they valued their Teferi more than getting us dead. Okay, they're surgically extracting our Elemental Eruption. If we find a soul land, we can attempt to Through the Breach. Our opponent will die to that if it resolves. Does our opponent want to get us dead, or they want to protect their Teferi? They want to get us dead. I think that's correct. We can block with this next turn if we have to. Ancient Tomb. Let's try it. Alright, they knew what we had in hand, so they're scooping it up, and we get the match with a nice little Through the Breach Emrakul to finish things off. So that is a pretty sweet looking 4-1 there. So 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, 2-1, and we 0-2'd that one round against our opponent who was just comboing faster than us. So let's talk about this deck. First things first, this deck is an absolute ton of fun. I do enjoy sometimes just throwing big monsters at people, right? I like the subtle nuance of sort of cantripping your way through, treading a bit of water, doing that whole control thing, but sometimes you just want to slam a giant monster in your opponent's face and say, what are you going to do about it? And this deck is very good at doing that, but it's got a little bit more intrigue about it because we have this little package of Elemental Eruption. And this was relevant. We did, you know, storm a little bit here and there and present sort of like a different line. So in that last game, our opponent burned their Force of Will on one of our dragons, which meant that our Through the Breach could then resolve. So just having this different approach felt really, really solid to me. The One Ring was something we never actually got to use. We had quite a lot of matchups that were sort of quick and over with. Sorry, I mentioned the matchup we lost earlier. The matchup we lost was the blue-white one, not the combo deck, wasn't it? We beat the Storm deck. We lost to the blue-white control deck, counter every spell we played. And I think they did counter almost every single spell we played, so... Sorry. Yeah, that felt pretty miserable. And I'm not sure defense grids would have helped because our opponents seemed to have quite a lot of removal for that sort of thing as well. But maybe we could have slipped through with a defense grid. But that is always going to be a difficult thing. We are a Force of Will check deck, but we do get this like Storm combo. And the way that this works is really interesting compared to the rest of our deck. So if our opponent sees sneak attacks and Through the Breaches, they're probably not countering a Seething Song. They're probably going to let this go and try and hit the payoff card because they know this is a card that just gets blocked by Force of Will. But then if we pivot into casting an Elemental Eruption, all of a sudden, like in that last round, our opponent's Force of Will looks terrible and they're going to be facing down 8 to 16 power sometimes. And that's just lights out for them. So I do like how this deck has morphed. And I think the last time I played it, I think I might have played this deck 3 times before. I might be wrong on that one, but I definitely 4-1'd at least one of them. But it was with I think it was with a build with Trinispheres. So we were running Trinispheres to be a bit like our defense grid, and we weren't playing Rite of Flame. So the idea was that we mainly just try and ramp using Seething Song, which, you know, is perfectly valid and worked all right for us in that one. But I do like this one where we've got this sort of other gear that we can shift into, so we're not as cold to a single Force of Will. We never put an Atraxa into play, but obviously we all know Atraxa's good, and we don't really need to discuss why that's the case, because you've read this card, you know what it does. How to improve this deck is a more interesting proposition. I did feel like outside of that blue-white deck, we had game into a lot of things, and we had a decent chunk of interaction we were going through, but we also had quite a few just turn ones, which is the reason to play this deck, is that you can power things out much faster than the blue-red show and tell decks. And the reason that's good at the moment is there's a lot of decks in the format that are running, you know, Grief Reanimate packages, which can just pick your hand apart. So if you're a deck that needs A plus B, let's say, and you're going to take a few turns to do it because you're not casting your piece until usually turn 2 to 4, let's say. That gives your opponent a lot more time to pick apart your hand and take away your A or your B or whatever you're looking at. Now, the plus side, obviously, of playing that is that you get all these cantrips, which would be really nice to have in a deck like this. However, having a deck that's got this raw power with this A plan and this B plan did feel like it wove things well together. I was relatively impressed with how this deck performed, actually. I did feel like I wanted a little bit more fast mana, but I don't know how you go about fitting that in. I don't think we're a deck that wants to run Chrome Mox. And I don't think Desperate Ritual, which is like sort of the next quality of red ritual, is really where I want to be. You can play Ironcrag Feat, which is 4 mana and it gives you 7 red mana, but it costs 1 red, which is going to be a bit of an ask if we're on like City of Traitors, Ancient Tomb type stuff, which is why you need the Seething Song to convert into like a bunch of red. So I don't think you want to play Ironcrag Feat. Like, it's fine if you're just going to play it and then cast Elemental Eruption, or play it Sneak Attack Activate, or play Through the Breach Activate. But maybe Desperate Ritual is something we could play as just like a one-off, just to have a tiny bit more fast mana so we can get out of the gate a little bit quicker. I think that might help. What it would also do is, it's an arcane spell, and there might be a weird situation where you cast it and you splice onto arcane this Through the Breach. That is a thing that people have done in the past with decks like this, where you have a bunch of Desperate Rituals and you just try and give yourself effectively another combo card. If you're unfamiliar with how arcane works, so when you cast another spell with a subtype arcane, you can then pay the splice cost of this, and then the text of this card goes onto that card. So we cast a Desperate Ritual, paying an additional 4, and then we also have Through the Breach tacked onto Desperate Ritual. So they have to counter the Through the Breach, the Desperate Ritual, so we don't get Through the Breach to resolve. But then we still have the Through the Breach in our hand that we can then fire off next turn. That is something maybe we're thinking about, not because I think this is actually going to be a thing that comes up very often. It's going to come up in maybe one in a few hundred games, I would say. I'd be very surprised if it came up in under 100 games playing with this. But just the idea of having an extra bit of fast mana, because having a spell that's fast mana is going to help with our Elemental Eruption. We sometimes found ourselves like 1 mana shy of being able to do this. So just having another piece of fast mana that we can actually cast would help. We definitely still want the Spirit Guide as a piece of fast mana. Even though it doesn't add to our storm count, it allows us to do surprise sneak attack activations, get more mana than you maybe think, but even more than that, it allows us to have more of our Ancient Tomb plus Soul Land or Spirit Guide into Seething Song, Sneak Attack, or Through the Breach. So it gives us more of that turn 1 potential. So we're definitely not trimming the Simian Spirit Guide there, but maybe we would want some additional fast mana. I wasn't overly impressed with the Show and Tells. Maybe we could trim a Show and Tell, or you could trim an Elemental Eruption. I think it's one of these two cards I would trim for a Desperate Ritual, just to give us a slight extra bit of punch there. I didn't really feel like I wanted anything else from the sideboard. Maybe our Graveyard Hate could be something like a Leyline of the Void, but sometimes Surgical Extraction is going to be giving you Storm for Elemental Eruption, so I understand the desire to have that. And also, if you've got the One Ring against a deck that's going to be doing some Graveyard shenanigans, you get protection for a turn, and then you can try and draw into some hate pieces like this when you need them, so maybe that's fine too. The Leyline of Sanctity seems quite important. I wouldn't hate having another copy of that, to be honest. And Pyroblast just never came up. Even though we brought it in quite often, it just never came up. Would it have been enough to help us out in those situations? I'm not wholeheartedly convinced by that one. Maybe we could run... I guess Overmaster is not very good because it's only instant or sorcery. Let me just pull that up for you. So this is the card that people have run in the past in decks that don't necessarily look quite like this, but this is the next instant or sorcery you cast this turn can't be countered, and we draw a card. So it's quite a nice effect, really. But the issue is, if we're trying to cast Sneak Attack, it doesn't help. If we're casting Elemental Eruption, then Elemental Eruption already gets around counter spells by being a Storm spell. So this can only really force through a Show and Tell or a Through the Breach, and Through the Breach is already a lot of mana, so it's not necessarily likely to work. So I do think the Pyroblast does end up being a little bit better there, but maybe there's another tool we could play here So what if... I don't really want the Trinispheres here. I don't know. Maybe there's a better option we have. I guess with the new set coming out, it's got those little baubles. So it's like a 1 mana bauble that stops spells being... It counters spells if they're cast without mana being paid to cast them. So that would stop counter spells from our opponent. And it's also got 2 mana sacrifice, draw a card. That might be quite good. The only thing that will stop on our end is Lotus Petal. But you could like board out your Lotus Petals in favor of some of these baubles and play a slightly slower game. We're boarding out some fast mana anyway. That does mean that we're going to have less turn ones. But if we're against a deck that's just going to be like Force of Willing us all out the wazoo, maybe that is an option we could try. It's also easy to cast off of any of our lands, which is not without merit. And if we keep Lotus Petals in while we're doing it, we can play our Lotus Petals out, then play the bauble. And that's not the end of the world either. So that could be something to think about. It also give us game against some of the combo decks that are going underneath us. And I suspect Oops All Spells is going to be incredibly powerful after the next set, because it's getting 8 more in total. So two different cards, but 8 black lands that come in untapped that aren't lands in their deck. So get to run 12 of those sources. And that deck feels like it's just going to be bananas with that. So maybe the Vexing Bauble is something we want to help out on that front. And they can't force a Vigor away because they can't cast a 0-mana spell. So I think that's where I would go with this. Maybe we'll play this again in a few weeks or months' time once we've got some new Modern Horizons 3 cards. But this is definitely a fun one, and I think I've rambled about this one quite enough. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed us smashing some people down. It was quite the thrill ride for me. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles, and lastly the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.